wasn't seeing. So.
There it is.
All right, so we'll convene this meeting. We've got the roll. You've got the roll call
Yes.
on your notes. Okay. And the first item is the approval of the minutes. Did anybody have any correction or comments about the minutes? If not, then we will approve those or accept those minutes as drafted. And now we'll move on to the appointment of our chair and vice chair. We'll start with the chair and that person will take over. I would like to nominate my friend, former Alder, Jen Cole, to chair this committee. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations for chair? Hearing none. All those in favor of electing Jen Cole to chair the Strategy and Finance Subcommittee signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations, Madam Chair.
So to I am assuming vice chairs are required then. So in the absence of a chair.
Yep.
So that would be that role just in the event.
In the event that you are
Unable.
unable.
Okay,
They
so
will run.
taking nominations for vice chair, I intend to attend as many meetings as possible, so I don't think it'll be a light lift.
I nominate myself if I can. I have some experience chairing meetings before, so fill in if need be.
Any other nominations? Last call. All right, seeing none. Quinn, right?
Yeah, Quinn Wakely.
Yes, you're always on the screen, so good to see you in person.
Yeah.
So all in favor of appointing Quinn as the vice chair for the subcommittee, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none.
Yay. Yes, thank you both.
And I saw that there was consideration for changes to the committee policies, that missing 3 or more meetings did that pass?
3 in a row.
3 in a row
3 in a row.
or 3 in a year?
It's 3 in a row or 1/3 of the meetings
1/3.
over the
Okay.
course of the year. And it's not automatic. It's,
Okay.
you know, it's just that
There's a
flag,
process.
Yeah.
Okay. Did that pass?
Mhm.
Okay. So I think that's something for all of us to note.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, moving along on the agenda, determination of meeting time. I'm looking at the minutes.
Correct. You're correct.
Because we didn't,
Yep,
we
okay.
didn't choose it last time because we wanted to make sure. we
Right,
had-
okay, so this was, 4 PM can be a challenge for me in particular, but wanting to make sure we're meeting everybody's needs.
I will say whatever the group wants to do, as long as it doesn't conflict with one of my, council meetings or committees that I'm on. I am very flexible. I'm probably the most flexible. So I'll let you guys.
Yeah, and I'm flexible as well, so whatever works.
I would tend to prefer evening. But yeah, I'm okay with 4. It's just it will affect probably my number of absences, keeping it at 4 o'clock.
My
Let's
input
see.
is that sorry.
No, go ahead, Jeremy.
My input is that I'm flexible most afternoons, most weekdays. I prefer later than 4 o'clock. 4:30 or 5 o'clock is easier for me. I was going to attend in person this week, but my work ran late, so I didn't have time to come over.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is 4:35 would be better, but
For me as well, is that late enough, Ben?
Yeah, 5 works.
5, how about Abby with your schedule?
Yeah, that works great for me especially if we keep Tuesday, because I'm already here usually on Tuesday for other meetings.
Tuesdays are good for me.
If it is it going to be the second Tuesday? Okay, that works well, because then it doesn't conflict. I mean, planning commission, that's fine.
Doesn't start till
7
7.
o'clock. If it were any other Tuesday, I might have a problem.
So it sounds like we have consensus on the second Tuesday at 5 p.m. going forward.
That works.
So the
Yep.
next meeting would be Tuesday, July 8th at 5 p.m. Then looking ahead, Tuesday, August 12th, Tuesday, September 9th, October 14th, November 11th, December 9th. No conflicts with
I have
any
no travel
holidays.
plan.
Perfect.
Awesome, we're clicking right through. All right, strategy and finance goals for affordable housing plan. I was not able to attend the last meeting, so this is where I'm gonna lean on you, Abby and Lisa, about what here.
Did you get one?
I do have the discussion made, so
I have a printed copy if it's easier. Oh, yep.
so is the hope to work through this or, yeah, sorry, just.
No,
Okay.
I mean, I prepared this because at our first meeting, this is such a big topic. It's such a big problem. Jeremy attended the housing, workshop, with me and Alan a couple weeks ago, and I mean, it's a huge problem. And we can't solve it all, and it's kind of hard to figure out where do we even begin. Like, we know we've got some money, but what can we do with it? What would be effective? What would be appropriate, given our comprehensive plan, given the restrictions on what what the did affordable housing extension line is for? How do we, like, we want to be consistent with the regional housing strategy, which I don't know if anybody needs a copy of the executive summary, Quinn or Jen, but I have this one.
I take it.
I can get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Page 15 in particular of that document has a list of all the priorities and strategies that they've identified, some of which are applicable here in Middleton as well. So I have used a guide like this in the past to structure thinking around a strategic planning process. And so I thought I'd try putting one together with links to select reading materials. One of the things I noticed as I was doing this, it sounds really getting into the minutia, and it is, but in terms defining the terms, I noticed that this Dane County has priorities and then strategies and then action items. In Middleton, we have strategies, actions, and then I threw on tasks. So, so the difference between Middleton's strategies, basically that's Dane County's priorities. And I don't know if we want to adopt one set or the other to avoid confusion. It might not actually matter as long as we know how far indented we are on the page, you know what I mean? But Dane County has 5 priorities: increasing the number of housing units attainable to low and moderate income households, increase the overall number of housing units, provide housing resources and protections for the most vulnerable populations, rehabilitate and preserve affordability of existing housing, and provide more pathways to home ownership. So that's, a very big, broad list, kind of like our build, buy, finance, and refurbish. But I thought for the action plan, it would be good to identify what is our vision for what affordable housing in Middleton looks like. And what problem are we trying to solve, so that as we get into the weeds and look at the different strategies, we can check back and make sure we know, okay, what did we say we wanted to do? Is this where we're headed? If not, do we need to get back on track, or did we not define our vision or our problem big enough? Do we have to change that? And fortunately, the comprehensive plan or comp plan has some stuff in it that, we can make use of and start with.
And I think we need to be, so in light of some action that's happened in Madison with relation to a project that they have, that it's being contested, that it's not aligning with their comp plan, I think we need to be like lockstep with the comp plan.
Good point.
I want to clarify, sorry, and this may have been discussed at that last meeting, and my apologies.
No.
I was gone for that one. Just to clarify, because I want to make sure the goals of the subcommittee, where they fall within the work of the other subcommittee and then the two joint committees, because ultimately it's, so is our goal here at this subcommittee level to prepare the plan for consideration of the group of the whole? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Sounds good. I just didn't want to make sure we weren't getting ahead of the other work that was being done.
I think they're more so waiting on this body to start to put together the framework, and
Okay.
then they're doing the education and outreach piece.
Okay. I'd also say we probably want as much alignment, since the city has aligned with that and is part of the Dane County housing strategy. Alignment with that as well is key. And I think you've pointed that out already.
Yeah,
here.
that's actually
Yep.
in our resolution.
Yep,
Committing to being consistent with that.
right.
I have a question. I'm not familiar with Madison's development issue where it was not in lockstep with the comp plan. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Sure, I'm not gonna say it's allegedly not, so there's been a suit brought against, so I don't know if you're familiar with the housing development that was proposed on the west side, that was getting a lot of opposition from the neighborhood. And so there's been a suit filed, and I think the judge put in an injunction in to that development and the rezoning and things could it not at this time move forward, because it was the case moves forward to determine whether or not the proposed project is keeping in with the comp plans identification that housing needs to be similar or have a feel of the neighborhood and its surroundings. So I'm not party to all the details.
Yeah, I'm not party to it either, but it could be something as simple as the council did, although I don't
Yeah.
think Madison would make such a mistake, that the council didn't make it clear that in their findings. Randy's got his hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead. Randy probably
Oh,
knows.
go ahead, guys. I wanted to talk about, finish up this discussion, then we can
Oh,
talk
okay.
again. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Jeremy, it could be something as simple as council didn't explicitly say, this is how, we find that this development is consistent with the comprehensive plan in these ways. And so maybe it's a administrative thing, but it could be something more serious, like it's not consistent with their comprehensive plan. But we want to avoid that.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, there's a smart growth planning law that requires that communities adopt a comprehensive plan at least every 10 years. And there are certain ordinances that are required by law to be consistent with the comp plan. So the typical trajectory is a community updates its comprehensive plan, and then immediately following that, you update your official map, your subdivision ordinance, your zoning ordinance, and all of the other documents to ensure that they're all in alignment. We're in the midst of that process right now with trying to tick off the last ordinance update, the subdivision ordinance, to ensure consistency.
Because all that other work has been done by the city of Middleton, and the thing, and regardless of whatever situation is happening in Madison, the comp plan lays out the city's vision.
Yes.
And, as we all worked through all of that rezoning process, it's that vision that is carried through with all of this, which we, again, should be in lockstep with.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
It's a North Star for us.
So the only thing I was thinking about in terms of goals, I really liked the previous committee had put together specific targets for creation of affordable housing units, numbers of housing units. I thought that was a great metric, really easy to identify, and it hits to the heart of our heart of our goal, I think, is to create, a certain number of affordable housing units. And so I would, I would suggest that that might be a good way to start.
Randy, just to clarify, are you referring to the workforce housing strategy that was put together based on the Dane County
That's
needs
correct.
assessment that was done?
Yeah.
It identified a specific number of units that we were deficient.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, thank you.
Do we know that number? Because I've seen the 318 annual new housing units needed for regional housing strategy.
So the original Dane County Housing Needs Assessment, I think it came out in 2015, and there were different metrics for how you would identify need. The one that the committee selected is just looking at the deficiency in the number of units for very low income residents that already lived in the community. So it was the least ambitious number, I would say, because they wanted a goal that they might be able to reach. And it didn't factor in people who may want to live in Middleton and may work here but couldn't afford to move here. It was just the existing deficiency. I believe the number was 395. And then we made really good progress toward that goal in creating, I think we probably reached the goal of creating 395 new income restricted units in a 3 to 5 year period. And then Dane County released their next needs assessment in 2019. And the deficiency under that same definition increased.
Oh.
Even with the creation of the new units. And I think it went up to 420, but
So 20 on top of the 395.
no, it was just increased from 395 to 420. But again, that was just under that narrow parameter of how we define need, because I believe that study had a few different ways to define need, and that was the one that was selected by the committee.
Okay.
So that actually could be a metric. Thinking about what success looks like, that the deficiency won't increase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that might be difficult for us to do, Lisa, just given the needs as the county as a whole.
Right. Yeah. But when I think about our vision, which is again aspirational, I think we're trying to make sure that housing in Middleton will be available and affordable for whom? I would say Dane County's workforce, because that's originally my committee is the Workforce Housing Committee, but also for people who live here and want to stay here. And that captures like seniors, but also maybe other people who are just, they want to move out of their current house and be able to buy something that's affordable within Middleton. How does that sound?
I
Randy,
like that statement.
I think Randy's trying to talk, but he's on mute.
Yep. Sorry about that. Lisa, I have a problem trying to figure out how we define affordability for sale units within the city of Middleton.
Sure.
How do we do that?
We do that based on the area median income. And that's something that's important with regard to using our TID funds. Because it's got to be 30%, all your housing costs are 30% or less of your household income.
Do we know, I think the AMI number I saw was 85,200. Is that per household or individual?
That is per household, I believe.
That makes sense.
So, and then we try to determine what that means in terms of home price based on that income.
Yep, and actually, I would be shocked if it's even possible to have a house in Middleton that is affordable to somebody making, 60 to 80% of AMI. I think
that was
is what we're looking at, but that, Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, we can be supporting attainable housing.
I mean, the definition within the affordable housing extension is housing that is affordable, which, as you mentioned, it's tied to the 30%. So a
Yeah.
home that's $1 million is affordable to someone.
right?
Mm.
So there's not really, I mean, it doesn't even mention there being an income restriction component,
Right.
which we should incorporate.
Yep.
But it is not required. The way that the affordable housing extension is written, it's pretty permissive.
Yeah, and that's why eventually, getting away from a broad aspirational vision, eventually we have to drill down and define who's the target income range, because as Abby said, we could say we want to make it affordable to people making 300% of the AMI. That would easily be challenged, I think, by our residents. But there's nothing restricting us from doing it. It's just, I don't think, I know I wouldn't support that. We're trying to make sure that the nurses and the teachers and the firefighters, anybody who wants to, who works here and wants to live here can.
Is the group that's assembled here, are you all familiar with this document that's released annually by WIDA? Did I bring this up in our last meeting? If I did, I'm so sorry.
You may have. but-
Okay, this is something we should all be bookmarking and familiarizing ourselves with. I have it bookmarked here and we use this document all the time. This is released annually in early April by WIDA, and it's the affordability limits based on the county's median income. So every county is assigned a different number. Obviously, Dane County's median income is quite a bit higher than some of the other counties. And then it calculates the family income limits at each affordability level. So for example, at 30% in Dane County, for a 1-person household, that's somebody earning $27,270 or less. And it goes all the way up to a 9-person household. It does that for several different percentiles of income level. And then it also gives you the corresponding rent limits for the county. So like at 40%, an efficiency in Dane County is affordable if it's $909 or less. That's all in. It includes it has to include utility costs. This chart does not go up to 80% area median income. And in the past, the city has supported ownership opportunities that are at 80%. The city of Middleton hasn't typically incentivized rental at 80% because that's getting a little bit closer to the market. But you can use these figures to calculate what an 80% limit would look like just by, for the 60%, you divide it by 6 and multiply by 8. That's how there is to it. So these charts are really helpful and it's such a hard question. It's my least favorite question that I get asked in this job when somebody says, what is considered affordable? Well, let me explain that. Let me pull up these 50 charts and tell you what it means depending on the size of your household and affordable at what percentage level
Of income.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of income. Yeah.
So that's where I think, right, like suggesting some ranges,
Yeah,
the target ranges might be important for us to make distinctions.
Well,
Yep.
in terms of rentals, I think, if we could, and maybe we do, break it down by category, perhaps, so many at 30%, so many at 50%, so many at 60%, wherever we draw the line. And in terms of ownership, maybe a reasonable goal is for us to try to get to that 100%. But I think that takes a little bit more study.
I do recall the Kurt Paulson's presentation, was that about a year ago? And I don't know if it was just renters, but it showed the gap by percentage, and the biggest gap was actually that like 60%, 80%. There really wasn't a gap in available units at that time. It was mostly at 30 and then at market rate. So that throw that there in case that
Mhm.
may lead us towards focusing more on the 30.
Are you talking about Is that related to the big squeeze graph that he shows where, you know, the higher priced housing and
so.
the lowest priced housing are where we have not enough?
Could be. I can't remember. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, I do remember it was that breakdown by. But it sounds right, Lisa.
I also wanted to mention Kurt Paulson's big squeeze graphic because I think that illustrates that if we want to serve lower income residents, that we would also have to solve the demand issues of those higher income residents so that they have plentiful housing and don't bleed demand into those more affordable units.
Yep. And that could be, you know, we've got, we have to use at least 75% for affordable housing specifically. And we may want to use more, but the other 25% can be used to support housing in general throughout the city. So maybe that part of it can go towards incentivizing or otherwise trying to bring in somebody to meet the market demand. Although I think that's something residents probably would not support if it's market rate luxury apartments, because that gets.
But it could be something that is maybe bringing existing stock up to
Yeah.
a different.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
how do you, not retrofit, but how do you upgrade existing stock into something that's.
I know that, I don't know if it was Dane County's or Kurt's study that identified it, but I know that existing housing stock is one of the easiest ways that we can meet affordable housing because their cost basis is much lower than new construction. So we should be looking at existing housing stock and making sure that we are maintaining maintaining the existing stock to the extent that we can.
Right, because I mean, I think about myself, like, I could move into other housing stock, but where I would be purchasing into single family home or duplex, it would be like at a fixer up level, that would be unfeasible for me and unattainable because of the amount of cost that would need to go into that, even though I could get into that home. So I think about other folks like that, like I'm not able to shift where I am in the market because of, like, it's that
Yep.
middle range.
And then in my neighborhood, I'm not the only one, there are a bunch of us who are empty nesters and would consider buying a condo or a smaller house and letting a family, buy our house because we got a park and good schools. But there's nothing for us to buy. It would all be more expensive or, as expensive as our mortgages, but our mortgages would have much higher interest rates than we currently have. So, and Kurt Paulson has mentioned this too. He pays less than most people, than his kids pay for rent.
Exactly.
For his mortgage. So. Okay.
Yeah.
So moving from vision to mission. Again, trying to make it consistent. Oh, go
Can I
ahead.
actually make
Sure.
thank you for putting this together, by the way. This is a really helpful document. And I like that you pulled items from the comp plan, right? This vision statement, this mission statement. I wanted to highlight specific pieces of the vision statement that maybe we can pull out for ourselves. Specifically the line, we are a thriving and safe community, accessible to all, and we celebrate diversity and equitable opportunities for all people. And I really think that equitable opportunities for all people is really kind of the highlight of what we should be doing here, right? Providing housing opportunities for all people, whether that's current residents in the city of Madison or Middleton, like you guys were talking about being able to make a move to a different kind of housing unit, or someone like myself who's renting and wants to buy a house here in Middleton, or it's somebody who, drives in from 20, 30 minutes out because they can't afford to live in the city, trying to make it more equitable to them. And I think making sure that our city policies, especially when it comes to zoning and development, And that was a lot of what we talked about last meeting, a lot of random things. And Abby, thank you for pulling all of that stuff together into the email afterwards, making sure that, I know we've already looked at them, but, maybe looking at them more and making sure that none of that sets us up to be excluding people, to be, raising prices for those lots or preventing us from, putting in duplexes or triplexes, quadplexes, is that what they're called?
Yes. that is.
More multifamily housing. You mentioned, maybe not wanting to maintain so much of one house anymore. Maybe you can turn it into a duplex. Do we have anything preventing that from happening in zoning or, as it relates to single family housing restrictions and all of that? How can we make, because as I was looking at all the materials, I kept looking at a map of Middleton and I was like, where's the room, right? Because I think that was one of the things later on about, what are our restrictions, outside of expanding into farmland and all of that. But, where is the room? Well, we have a lot of single family housing. How can we play with that and make sure that, if people want to, be able to change their house, they have the opportunity to do so. It's their property. Let them do what they want to do to it. But thinking along those lines, kind of where my thought process started. And I like how we're talking about the metrics because there's a lot of tools, especially within this Dane County Housing Plan, and it specifies for each strategy the specific metrics that we can highlight. I always think copying and pasting, especially when it's tried and tested, is going to be the easiest thing. I think we can agree with a lot of these priorities. Maybe it's, well, what are the strategies within this that we can specifically pull on and try to do ourselves, given the resources that we have? Because, this is a great kind of wish list, maybe, but, we don't have the same, the same resources or tools at our disposal as another village or city within Dane County or the city of Madison, given that we're a little smaller. But yeah.
Yep.
I'll try to put together before the next meeting, kind of a summary of the zoning ordinance and how the level to which the city has decided to permit things like accessory dwelling units within existing neighborhoods, as well as opportunities for like subdivisions, because we've reduced our lot size. There might be more. I'm not saying like we've resolved them all, but at least then you would have a summary. You also asked about like, I think you're asking about zero lot line duplexes. That is another opportunity that exists in our community where there's a side-by-side that already is there and it's oftentimes a rental. But if the owner is getting ready to sell it, we've had a few opportunities where residents who lived in the unit said, I want to buy it, but only my side because I can't take on a mortgage for the whole. And there is a process by which you can create a zero lot line and there can be each side owned individually. So that's something I can share before the next meeting. But yeah, all of these things, there are steps involved, so. Okay.
Those changes to the permissivity of accessory dwelling units and subdivisions, those changes were recent, right?
Yes, yeah, they took effect March 1st of 2024.
Okay, thank you.
I believe we've had 2 permits since then for accessory dwelling units. So it's not 0, but it's maybe not to the level that we would like to see.
Well, and one of the things, I think it was in one of the More Housing Wisconsin papers, and I brought this up last time, the idea of the city developing a standard plan for an ADU, so that if somebody is interested, that lowers the bar for them quite a bit. If there's a plan that can fit, be like off the shelf from the city, that could be a good investment for us to make to incentivize this development of ADUs.
Yeah, one of the things that came up when I was watching all the videos from the series that was shared was for the ADUs that requires additional permitting and all of that to get that through. Okay.
Yes. We don't require a separate water and sewer lateral extended, so that is a big barrier in terms of cost, but there are permitting requirements. They have to meet building code requirements. There are setback requirements. Some covenants in neighborhoods prohibit them, and the city doesn't override private covenants. So that's, you know, maybe another area at least to do some education on.
Do you know if any of those like sprung up recently or if those are older?
They would all be older.
Okay.
I'm not aware of anything that happened recently. I'd probably be, I don't know off the top of my head which neighborhoods they are, but I would probably look at North Lake just because of the time when it was approved. Possibly Stonefield and Fox Ridge.
They would be preempted by changes to state law.
They could be, and there actually is some legislation, I think, that's being proposed, and I'm not sure the status of it, but we did have a meeting with Senator Roy's office regarding that. They were curious about the city's experience with accessory dwelling units, and I believe that that is part of what they're taking a look at, is whether that would be something that would go statewide as a requirement that municipalities must permit them, and private covenants can't get in the way of it.
So thinking about the problem we're trying to solve, if someone were to ask, what is this committee? What is Middleton doing on affordable housing? I put in there the mission from the housing chapter, which applies to everything, the housing chapter of the comp plan, and it says Middleton will support a wide range of housing types, sizes, and costs throughout the city, including quality affordable housing, in order to meet the projected housing needs. And I think a succinct restatement of that specifically for affordable housing could be that Middleton will support a wide range of new and rehabilitated affordable housing throughout the city, including both rental and owner occupied units.
Is that typed up in here somewhere?
No,
Will you say it again?
sure. Middleton will support a wide range of new and rehabilitated affordable housing throughout the city, including both rental and owner occupied units. And we can switch those around to put the owner occupied first if that's what the.
Lisa, can we define what we mean by affordable?
We can, in a second sentence, just, you know, to restate that affordable housing, did I put it in here? We could even quote the Dane County Municipal Housing Strategy, finds affordable housing is affordable when a household spends less than 30% of their gross income on housing costs. And we could even explain what that means, you know, to include.
And that allows then for us to incorporate all of those AMIs into that calculation. It's not gonna pinpoint just one income range.
Right. Which would align with the resolution that the council passed too.
And gives the most flexibility to, I mean, especially if we think about if we help with a roadmap to housing that might be targeted at multi-income ranges, so that if you know, there's such studies done that shows that when you have mixed income ranges, everyone does better. So.
And in trying to describe a solvable mission statement, maybe it would help to define what we mean by a wide range when we talk about a wide range of new and rehabilitated units, maybe like a number in reference to projected housing needs.
A number. We can do that. Maybe we can write this up and then next time we can try to flesh out what those numbers might be. I mean, it would come from ultimately, I think, the 318 per year through 2040 that Dane County says Middleton should be developing.
But how many are we behind
Yeah,
to
that's
date?
true.
So we would need to
Yeah.
Catch up.
catch up.
And I also think that we have to be a little bit careful. You brought up the fact that the 30% cost to income could go up to as high as say 300% of the the city's median income. And I think that I don't see our committee supporting that wide of a range. So I'd like to at least have a discussion as to what that upper limit means.
Well, that leads us to the next question. Who are we trying to help?
Right, so we could define a target within, but being able to emphasize or message that by working towards that target, we've also either opened up or made available or, other income, higher income levels have been helped by the improvements to our, whether that's because they're now a landlord with an ADU, right? So there's other, but we can, I think by defining our target as maybe not the high end.
Yeah.
Yeah. To Randy's point.
Yeah, I think Lisa, you've gotten there going up to 120% AMI, right? Which is
As high as we would go.
right.
Agree. Because that's 100 well, depending on how many people in the household, that's a household income of $102,240.
Which is with grocery I mean,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of the rising costs, that doesn't go nearly as far as it used to, so.
Yeah.
Especially with multiple family members.
Right. And what about, okay, so these three ranges, that sounds workable?
When do those ranges come into like play? Is that regarding like metrics and reporting, or is that specifically like if we're setting up a loan program, those are the people who would be allowed into that program?
That we will decide, yeah, that's
Okay.
how we could do it.
This is a target population that that any plan that we develop, not plan, but because we're developing the plan right now, but any program that we develop, it would be geared towards within these target ranges.
So the
Yes.
benchmark percentages that are typically used in reports, is it 30, 60, 80, or is it all over the board? In terms of percent of AMI?
Wow, I
It
didn't.
seems like
think
we often
about-
see 30 as one of the numbers, in the.
Mm,
that would
Yeah,
be-
30 is typically considered very low income.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
usually low income housing tax credit projects will have some 30% units.
Yeah, that's what I've seen, 30, 50, and 60 in terms of rentals.
Yeah, interestingly, the subsidy limits document that I shared earlier has 40 as well, and I don't recall ever seeing 40%, but there are some.
Is it too ambitious to say 30% AMI and below and then say 30 to 80?
Or. I was gonna say, or what about 30 and below, 30 to 60, 60 to 80? 80 to, because the 80 to 120% is coming from the definition of attainable housing. And I don't need to stick with, 30%, 30, 60, 90.
So what would be the advantage to distinguishing the 60% and below in an additional range?
Like adding another
Yeah.
specific range for
Yeah.
30% and
Yeah.
below. maybe because that would be considered very low, but
I mean, 60%.
60% is pretty low.
Darn low.
Right
Yeah,
there.
in a way, we're kind of saying anything up to 120. I'm just by just having the range, we're not really. Yeah, so are we? Are we saying we're prioritizing one over the other, or is there a certain priority within those three?
I don't think we're prioritizing at this moment, but we can, this could help. Knowing what our target income ranges are. At a future meeting, we can decide how do we want to serve each of these populations. What can we do for them and how much of our effort and our money, frankly, should be targeted at helping out these folks.
Right. Yeah, because again, unless we're prioritizing one, which wouldn't be in favor of prioritizing at the lower end, but if we're not going to prioritize one, then there's no real benefit. I guess I'm not sure what the benefit is of having 4 bullets versus just saying up to 120. Right.
Yeah, why, yeah, okay, so
Right.
not distinguishing a range just up to 120. Because, so, right, since there's also thinking that we need to keep in mind that this is geared, it is workforce housing. So we are needing to think about. Maybe our space is not filling housing needs for those that are not working. And that would be the lower end of our range, because that's likely folks who are on some type of assistance. Because, we know wages
Mhm.
will get folks close, like at that
Right.
60 level more than.
And if we are not careful with how we define it, we're going to have people trying to use these funds for market rate apartment rentals at 80 to 120% of the income levels. And so, and I don't want to see that happen. I don't think that's where this committee should be focusing their efforts.
I agree.
So we could specify one way might be Randy to, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if a solution to Randy's concern would be for the 80 to 120% in parentheses owner occupied opportunities or something like that.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing, keep a lower percentage for rentals and.
Yeah.
Yep.
And even the 80%, I would like to see us, be targeting the rentals at 60% and below. At 80%, the market really, should be meeting that need. We're very close to it.
I'll make a note, maybe focus 60%.
I think part of the issue here is that some of these numbers could be more important to like specific strategy or more relevant to specific strategies, because I think one of the overall ideas is just to increase housing in general, right? So it's helping, more than just people on, the 30%, the 120%. It's a diffuse benefit. Everybody benefits when you add more housing. It's going to help, supply the market. And I think one of the issues is that there is just so much demand that that some of our work is going to focus on just getting housing up in general, not specifically supplying workforce housing. That is part of it, but some of it is just going to be incentivizing more housing in general, at least in my opinion. So some of these numbers won't really be relevant to that specific strategy.
Yeah.
I want to be careful about identifying the 80 to 120 as the only owner occupied group, because I think then it perpetuates those with lower incomes not becoming homeowners. And we know that home ownership and housing equity is the fastest way for marginalized or underrepresented populations in home ownership to have access to modern wealth. And I would not, right, and we know that because of the rental shortage, it squeezes those with lower incomes every time landlords are raising rents. We don't, right, like the state doesn't have good caps on how much those can go up per year. So it just continues to create housing insecurity at those lower income levels. And why can't we figure out programs to get maybe lower income home ownership programming? So that's where I would want to.
Well, I understood the comment about the 80 to 100% being for owner occupied, not as that's exclusively the owner occupied group, so much
Right.
as this is not gonna be for rentals. Because because we don't want to be, even though subsidizing luxury housing or luxury rentals could help with that big squeeze.
Right.
That's not what we are intending to do. The market will fix that problem. So as long as we understand that the 80 to 100%, 120% is not intended to be, we're not subsidizing rentals for those folks.
Okay.
But housing could be, if somebody can find housing and, trying to get in that market and buy a duplex or half of a duplex that's for sale and qualify for loans, that, I think that's totally what we want to be supporting.
Thanks for clarifying.
In case it's helpful for context, I quickly calculated the 80% levels for a apartment rental. For a 1-bedroom, the limit would be $1,948, and for a 2-bedroom, the limit would be $2,337. Just to put it in context of what you all are seeing in the market and whether you think that the current market is able to provide for that 80% rental.
Yeah.
My son's in the studio at $1,275.
Wait, so for clarification, when we're talking about this 60-80% AMI, it's talking about the specific rate that rent is set at, not what their income is.
So 80% AMI is the income, and then that translates to a rent for Dane County, which I looked up in this chart, the 60% numbers, and then calculated what that would translate to for 80%. Because there was a comment that somebody made a comment saying the market can provide for 80% for rental housing. It's not currently doing it for owner occupied.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And so if we wanted this to be affordable, it would be 30% of income instead of 60% of income. Is that right?
Well, the 60%, the ranges apply to this $85,200 figure. That's the area median income. So if you make between, if you make less than $51,120, you're in that 60% AMI and below. And that means that $51,000, you're spending more than $17,000 on housing over the year, because that's 30%. So it's kind of, layer upon layer. And then 80 to 120%, that means, somebody making $102,240, that's 120% AMI, they're spending around $30,000 a year on housing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So as new chair, I just want to do time check. What are we scheduled for 1 hour on things, Gabby, or we?
I think we scheduled them for an hour.
Okay.
And
So.
I appreciate the question because I have to jump off here.
We all have lives. So wanting to, we've got 3 minutes remaining. So wanting to talk about next steps. Again, thanks for being patient because I missed the other meeting. So getting a little bit caught up here. What are we hoping to achieve for us to move forward to our next meeting to get further down the line with this? Are we wanting to continue through this document or spending more time drafting the plan? Or I'd love to hear your thoughts.
My intention for this document was to help us with the drafting of the plan.
Okay.
So like right now, I think we have draft components for the first part of it.
Okay.
Getting into the values.
Yep.
And the constraints that will help us with future sections. And then the big one, of course, is question 6, what actions will we take? And even that, the first pass through, I see being, let's just brainstorm and get ideas on the table. And then the second pass through, after we thought about it for a month, can be, okay, which of these will target which groups? Which of these fall into renter versus owner occupied? Which of these, can we implement like easily or fairly easily? So I think if we could finish going through this at our next meeting.
Okay.
That will get us a good way towards, framing the plan.
Yep. Okay. And then with having worked kind of through a first pass through questions 1 through 3, wanting to understand Abby's staff role of, are you the drafter or she's a drafter?
Well, because one thing I didn't comment on is in the minutes, there was like this long list of things for Abby to do, and I was like,
Okay.
"Ooh, that didn't look good." So
Oh.
let me draft the start, Abby, and I'll share it with you and we can work on it, but I don't want you to have to.
Yeah, I always want us to check in on roles and responsibilities because of,
Yes.
I know
Yeah.
how taxed you are, so, yep.
Appreciate that. I thought of a couple ways to kind of reformat some of the things that we already have, and I'm thinking our intern too can help on that.
Great.
So, I sent him an email and copied Scott, who will be our new associate planner tomorrow, as of tomorrow.
Yay.
So we'll try to work with Lisa and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts.
Okay. So continue thinking through this and reading all the materials that we've received. Can you send the WIDA report if that was not
Yes.
sent?
Yep.
Thank you. So we will convene again in July.
Great.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See ya.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Go.
Okay, so are you familiar with the Prairie Fields project up in Prairie du Sac?
No.
We should at some point have